Today's lesson is Plus Talk in a train station. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to be talking about transportation. When you visit a city and you want to get around, you might take a train, you might take a bus, you might take the subway, etc., etc. And at some point, you will be in a train station, and you'll need to ask about tickets, you'll need to ask for directions, and then, of course, you'll also need to do something about losing a ticket. How do you get the ticket back? How do you get a refund? And those are the things we're going to be talking about today and in our next program.
Yes, these are all of the various situations that can come up when you're traveling by train, when you're in a train station, and sometimes when the train station is really big and there are a lot of people and you're not familiar with the system, it can be very stressful to figure out where to go, how to buy tickets, what tickets are available. So this is just a look at some of the situations that can pop up.
Right, and we're going to be going to New York City, so of course lots of people like to travel to the Big Apple, and if you want to see the sights there, or if you want to do business or go to school there, you're going to need to figure out how to get around. So in today's conversation, we've got Emily talking to the clerk, and she's inquiring about tickets, and she's at Grand Central Station in New York. So let's listen to their conversation right now.
In a train station. 1. Inquiring about tickets. Emily is waiting in line at Grand Central Station, New York City.
Hi, how may I help you today?
Yes, hello. I'm visiting New York for a week, but I'm staying in Port Chester. I'm looking for the most cost-effective way to commute to Manhattan from there. I'm honestly a little overwhelmed.
Yes, fares can be a little complicated. Basically, your best options are a 10-trip ticket or a weekly pass.
So, what's the difference between them?
The 10-trip ticket is cheaper, but only if you travel during off-peak hours. The weekly pass is a little more expensive, but you'll be able to take any train on the New Haven line for the next 7 days.
I see. I'll be commuting during peak hours, so the weekly pass sounds like my best bet. Thanks.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 inquire， 这个字是动词，指询问或是查询。例如 Kelly inquired about the price to rent a car for the week. Kelly 询问租车1个礼拜的价钱。或是 Dale inquired about the job that he saw advertised online. Dale 查询了他在网络上看到真人广告的那份工作。另外，补充这个字的名词 inquiry。inquiry, inquiry 表示询问、打听或是调查。举例来说 General inquiries could be avoided by providing an FAQ on the company's website. 公司网页的常见问题页面可以避免一般的问题。也可以说 I've made an inquiry about the cost of having the roof replaced. 我询问了更换屋顶的费用。再来我们看到单字 cost effective。这个字是形容词，指划算的或是有成本效益的。例如 Oscar researched the most cost-effective ways to invest in the stock market. Oscar 研究投资股票市场最符合成本效益的方法。或是 The CFO used cost-effective strategies to help increase profit. 财务长采用具备成本效益的策略来提高营收。另外补充这个字中的单字 effective。这个字是形容词，表示有效的或是起作用的。举例来说 The doctor recommended an effective treatment for the infection. 医生针对这种传染病推荐一种有效的疗法。也可以说 If used properly, lemon juice can be an effective stain remover. 柠檬汁如果使用恰当的话，可以成为有效的去污剂。接下来我们看到形容词 complicated，表示复杂的或是难懂的。举例来说 The complicated mathematical formula was difficult for the students to understand. 这个复杂的数学方程式对学生而言很难理解。或是 The work needed to restore the computer systems was so complicated that Janice decided to bring in an expert. 修复电脑系统要费的工太复杂了， Janice 决定找专家来。另外，把 complicated 字尾的 d 去掉，就变成了动词 complicate， 指使复杂化或是变复杂。例如 Repairs to the house were complicated after the drill broke. 钻头坏掉后，房屋的修缮变得很麻烦。也可以说 The trade war has complicated supply chains for businesses around the world. 贸易战使全球商业供应链变得复杂。
So the first conversation is titled Inquiring About Tickets. So the verb inquire means to ask. It's a more polite form of to ask. You can say, I would like to ask you some information about rooms available at the hotel. Or I could say, I would like to inquire about rooms available at the hotel. So inquire just means to ask, but in a more polite form. And here we have Emily, who is inquiring about tickets. Emily is waiting in line at Grand Central Station, which is the biggest train station, the main train station in New York City. And the clerk greets Emily by saying, Hi, how may I help you?
Right, and of course, I believe all the trains from upstate and from the northern parts of New York City and beyond go into Grand Central Station, and the trains from Long Island go into Penn Station. That might be useful information if you're ever in New York City. But here she's at Grand Central Station, and she's getting some information. So the clerk politely greets her. When I went to New York City, sometimes you get polite clerks. Sometimes they're kind of rude. In this particular case, I think the clerk is being quite polite. How may I help you today? What can I do for you today?
And Emily says, Yes, hello. I'm visiting New York for a week, but I'm staying in Port Chester. I'm looking for the most cost-effective way to commute to Manhattan from there. So Emily is only in New York for a week. However, she is staying outside of New York City, and she needs to get into the city every day. Maybe she needs to go into the city to work or to take classes. But in any case, she is looking for a cost-effective way to commute. Something that is cost-effective is not expensive, that keeps within one's budget. So you could say that a cost-effective way of eating lunch is to prepare your own food for lunch instead of going to a restaurant every day. And here, Emily is looking for a cost-effective way to commute to Manhattan. To commute means to go to and from a place via public transportation or by one's own car. And Manhattan is one of the boroughs in New York City. There are 5 boroughs. And when people talk about New York City, what they mean is Manhattan, even though New York City is not Manhattan, it includes Manhattan. Manhattan is an island in New York City.
Yeah, this is where all the big buildings are, and this is where Wall Street is, and Times Square, and all that fun stuff. So, of course, Port Chester is north of New York City. It's kind of close to Connecticut there. So, of course, she wants to commute to Manhattan every day to take the train in and to go back out. So, if you commute, you're going back and forth between your home to your office or to school or whatever. And, of course, she's overwhelmed. New York City is pretty big, and the transportation networks there can be kind of confusing. So she just wants to figure out how to get to and from the city. Well, the clerk is quite helpful here. The clerk says, yes, fares can be a little complicated. Fares are referring to the different prices for trains, whether you want to take a local train or an express train, or there are different fares for peak trains during rush hour and for non-peak times. So indeed, the fares can be quite complicated. If something's complicated, it involves a lot of details, and it can be quite difficult to understand. Sometimes if you want to repair, say, your car or your motorcycle, it can be quite complicated. There are all different parts and different kinds of systems that you need to take into consideration.
Yep, and the word fare can refer to the money, the cost of taking a taxi also, and also the cost of taking a bus. So you can also say, aside from train fare, you can say bus fare, taxi fare. When I was a kid, my parents gave me money every week, which included bus fare to get to school because my high school was quite far from where I lived, so I needed bus fare to get there. And that was part of my allowance, which was the money that my parents gave me every week.
Right. So again, the clerk says the fares can be quite complicated. Basically, your best options are a 10-trip ticket or a weekly pass. So you can buy single trip tickets, or there are special packages that you could try. You could try buying a 10-trip ticket, a ticket that gives you 10 trips. That would give her 5 trips into the city and 5 trips back out to Port Chester. That's one option. Or she could get a weekly pass, which means that you can take unlimited rides for a week.
Yes, and Emily asks, so what's the difference between them? Because she knows that there are these two options, but she doesn't really know what the difference is between these two options. And the clerk replies, the 10-trip ticket is cheaper, but only if you travel during off-peak hours. So even though the cost of the 10-trip ticket is cheaper than the cost of the weekly pass, this is only true if Emily were to travel during off-peak hours. Off-peak hours are those hours when people aren't using the train that much. So it could be any time, for instance, that's not between 6 and 8:30 in the morning. That's when people are going to work, and not between 5 and 7 when people are getting home from work. Those are off-peak hours.
Right. So, of course, she only can travel during off-peak hours. And then the weekly pass is a little more expensive, but you'll be able to take any train on the New Haven line for the next 7 days. So these are different options here. Of course, it sounds like she can use the weekly pass to ride both during off-peak hours and peak hours. She can take any train she wants to. It has to be on the New Haven line. That's a special line there of the train that goes out of New York City. And, of course, the ticket is good for the next 7 days. After 7 days, the ticket is no good.
And Emily replies, I see. I'll be commuting during peak hours, so the weekly pass sounds like my best bet. So, in fact, Emily will be traveling to Manhattan in the morning when everybody else is traveling to Manhattan for work, for school, and she'll be going back to Port Chester when everybody else is getting off work and school. So she'll be commuting during peak hours, so the weekly pass would be her best bet. So the phrase best bet means the thing or the action that will produce the best result. I could say, for instance, I'm trying to get to work, but it's raining, it's snowing, the bus isn't coming, I don't feel like working, so my best bet would be to take a taxi because that would allow me to get to work faster.
Okay, so that's her best option. It's her best choice, and hopefully she will have a successful visit to New York City, and she might even get a seat on the trains. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first conversation for today. Let's move on now and talk about asking for directions. Emily, of course, is new to New York City, so she's not too familiar with how to get around, so she needs to ask for directions. Let's listen to her conversation now.
2. Asking for directions. Emily has just stepped off the train, and she's not sure which exit to take.
Excuse me, I wonder if you could help me. I'm trying to find the right exit. Of course. Where are you headed? The Langston Hughes residence. It's on East 127th Street, between 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue. Let's see, so you're heading northwest. In that case, you'll want the north exit. Go through that turnstile over there, and then take the staircase on the other side. It'll lead you right to the exit. Once you're there, just find the door on the west side of the station. Thank you. I really appreciate the help.
So in the second conversation, which is titled Asking for Directions, Emily has just stepped off the train. She is now in Manhattan, and she's not sure which exit to take. So Emily asks a person that she comes across at the train station, and she says, "Excuse me, I wonder if you could help me. I'm trying to find the right exit." So the way that Emily starts talking to the passerby is very common. First, you say, "Excuse me," if you want to get somebody's attention. And then to let that other person know why you stopped them, you can start off by saying, "I wonder if you could help me." So that puts that person in the right state, awareness that what you need is some kind of information.
Okay, and the passenger, of course, is quite helpful here. The passenger says, "Of course. Where are you headed? Where are you going?" Again, this is a passenger in New York City, and this is kind of surprising for me because the first time I went to New York, I thought everybody there was rude and they weren't willing to help too much. Some people are, though. It kind of depends on the person, but here the passenger is more than willing to help. The passenger says, "Of course. Where are you headed?" And Emily says, "Well, the Langston Hughes residence." That's where she's going. That's where she's headed. It's on East 127th Street between 5th Avenue and Madison Avenue. So the Langston Hughes residence is a tourist attraction in Harlem, I believe, and she's going there to go check it out, but she's not quite sure how to get there.
Yes, and residence is a place where somebody lives. Langston Hughes was a famous poet, African-American poet, and the place where he lived, his residence, has since become a tourist attraction, and Emily is trying to get there. And the passerby says, "Let's see, so you're heading northwest." So the passerby is figuring out the direction that Emily is heading toward, and the passenger has figured out that the direction is northwest. Northwest is a direction that is between north and west of where one is standing. And the person says, "In that case, you'll want the north exit." So the passerby is telling Emily to take the north exit, go through that turnstile over there, and then take the staircase on the other side. So if you're in a New York City subway station, you'll likely come across or have to go through a turnstile, which is a narrow gate that you have to go through after you've paid your ticket or after you've carded through to get to the place where you take the train. And the turnstile usually has a metal bar that moves in a circle so that only one person can go through it at a time.
So she's going to be going in a northwest direction. She'll want to go to the north exit, go through the turnstile, and then take the staircase on the other side. Staircase, of course, is stairs, basically. It's where stairs are. Take that set of stairs on the other side. You'll go straight to the exit. And once you're there, just find the door on the west side of the station, and then you'll be at street level. And then maybe you'll need to ask someone else for directions, specifically how to get to the Langston Hughes residence.
Right. And Emily has understood what the passerby has told her, and she says, "Thank you. I really appreciate the help." So that's something that you can say when somebody has given you directions or given you advice, something that you wanted to know, and now you know. You just thank them, show your appreciation, and say, "I really appreciate the help" afterward.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在第一部分对话里面，车站职员向 Emily 说明10次票和周票的差别。那职员就说 The 10-trip ticket is cheaper, but only if you travel during off-peak hours. 10次票比较便宜，但只能在离峰时间搭车。好，句子里面的 only 表示只有在点点点的时间、地点或是情况。那它可以用来修饰副词、副词片语或者是副词子句，像是可以用 only 来修饰 if、when 或者是 after 所引导的子句。那我们看到文中它就是用 only 来修饰 if 引导条件副词子句。我们来造个例句 That door is rarely used. It is opened only when it's necessary. 那扇门很少用， 只有必要的时候才会打开。Only when it's necessary， 只有在必要的时候。那另外要特别注意，当 only 摆在句首的话呢，主要子句必须倒装，也就是要把助动词移到主词前面。如果主要子句里面没有助动词，那你就要自己生出一个适当的助动词咯。我们来看常见的句型，就是 only when 或者是 only after 或是 only if， 主词加动词加上助动词加主词加动词。好，我们刚刚用 only when 开头的话，这个句型是表达只有当什么什么的时候呢才怎么样。那如果用 only after 开头，是指说只有在什么什么之后才怎么样，而 only if 开头则是说只有在什么样的情况条件下才怎么样。我们造个例句， I will forgive you only if you apologize， 只有在你道歉的情况下我才会原谅你哦。那我们现在用 only 来开头，就会写作 only if you apologize will I forgive you， 我们把 will 移到 I 的前面来形成倒装了。好，那在第一部分对话的最后， Emily 她听完车站职员的说明呢，那他就说呢，他会在尖峰时刻往返，所以周票听起来是他最好的选择。这边他用到 The weekly pass sounds like my best bet 来表达周票听起来是我最好的选择。那么 bet B-E-T 它原本是指说打赌赌注，引申表达选择计划对策办法的意思。当我们说 somebody's best bet 是用来表达某人最佳选择，某人最安全可靠的方法。那像我们要提供建议的时候，其实你就可以说 Your best bet is to 点点点，你最好的办法，你最好的对策就是什么什么。举例来说 If you want to avoid traffic, your best bet is to take the MRT. 如果你想要避开车潮，最好的办法就是搭捷运了。好，句子里面的这个 best bet 你也可以把它换成 surest bet 或者是 safest bet， 意思差不多，就是最安全可靠的方法咯。好，我们再补充一下，如果是 a safe bet 或者是 a good bet或是 a sure bet， 这可以表达说极有可能会成功的事物，或者是十拿九稳的事物。我们常用的句型就是 It's a safe bet 或是 It's a good bet It's a sure bet 再加 that 子句去表达很可能肯定怎么样怎么样。举例来说 It's a safe bet that Kim will get the promotion. Kim 很有可能会获得升迁。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Inquire. Tim's parents called to inquire about the student exchange program. Commute. It takes Cindy an hour and a half to commute to work each day. Complicated. The application process is complicated, but we can help you through it. Northwest. The wind suddenly changed direction and started blowing northwest.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.